The creature let out an unmistakable squeal of rage as stimulus Y835 took effect. Dr. Christensen pressed his face up against the glass, eager to see the results. It had to work this time. It simply had to. He was certain that this attempt would make all the other failures worth it, and he'd once again prove the Foundation's faith in him to be well placed. SCP-5683 shrieked a loud, insect-like sound that would have normally made the blood run cold of anyone that heard it. But to Dr. Christensen, it was like music, a monster's dying fanfare to mark his success. Soon he'd be the researcher who neutralized not one, but two tenacious, highly adaptable anomalies. The senior researcher could feel his heart racing as the deadly giant spider started to twitch, then burst into two identical entities. The pair of arachnid anomalies had reacted much like the results of the tissue sample tests conducted earlier, dividing into two separate organisms. Christensen held his breath. The tissue samples had destroyed each other, attacking and injecting the other with lethal doses of venom. Surely, he reasoned, duplicating SCP-5683 into two would have the same result. His heart sank as he watched one of the spider creatures, the duplicate, perish almost immediately. As it often did when presented with human prey, SCP-5683 attacked using its mandibles and impaled its copy with its front legs to pin it in place. The clone had bitten back, with Dr. Christensen already knowing that would have granted SCP-5683 an immunity to its own venom. Its powers of adaptation were fiercely, frustratingly efficient, and nothing demonstrated this more than the intense reaction from the man tasked with destroying it. Dr. Christensen hurled the nearest object, a coffee mug, at a glass window of the observation room, overlooking the test chamber. He pounded his fist against the glass, hardly with the required force to cause damage, but enough to send pain shooting down Christensen's wrist, which then nestled in his forearm, a reminder that the experiment, like the others, had failed.
"Why can't I destroy you?"
he muttered through clenched teeth, looking with hatred at the enormous spider in the chamber below. The directive had reached him the day immediately after New Year's Day 2020, and straight from a member of the O5 Council no less. Their message expressed how impressed the Council was with Dr. Christensen's success with the Doomsday Clock project, and how favorably his name had been mentioned in Council meetings. This boded well for the ambitious Foundation doctor. He'd been hoping to snag the director position at Site-04 now that Director Bray had retired. But there was one more test from the O5 Council. They wanted Dr. Christensen to use the knowledge garnered during his previous success to solve the SCP-5683 problem. If he could successfully complete that assignment, it would be his ticket to being promoted. With the comfy role of site director and all its perks in mind, Dr. Christensen accepted the assignment from the Council to deal with SCP-5683. SCP-5683 was quite the beast, not an anomaly for those with intense arachnophobia. The huge spider-like organism was extremely hostile towards humans and had to be kept in a constant state of medical sedation. Otherwise, it would relentlessly attempt to breach containment and slaughter any and all personnel in its path. What had made SCP-5683 such a problem for the Foundation was the creature's ability to rapidly regenerate damage, as well as modify its own body in reaction to threats. Much like a certain particularly hard-to-destroy reptile, the spider-like entity could adapt itself to become more resistant to any danger posed to it. And of course, this meant that the Foundation needed this dangerous creature eradicated. The frequent containment breaches and sheer number of casualties caused by the arachnid anomaly were significant enough to cause an increasing drain on the SCP Foundation's resources. So, with the termination order coming from the very top, the O5 Council themselves, Dr. Christensen was tasked with overseeing the neutralization of SCP-5683. During an initial deliberation, Dr. Christensen met with researcher Miles and Hall, junior researcher Silva, and security chief Ade to discuss earlier attempts to terminate SCP-5683. The new head of the termination project was perturbed to learn that the research team had little in the way of useful information to offer, beyond what the Foundation already knew about the creature. but Christensen decided some basic stress testing would at least be a start. After a successful tissue sample test, wherein some of SCP-5683's genetic material was incinerated, Dr. Christensen tried to simply destroy the spider with fire. An understandable response, to say the least. However, exposing SCP-5683 to temperatures of 850 degrees Celsius for just 30 seconds didn't quite yield the easy victory he had hoped for. The arachnid thrashed about and screeched in reaction to the heat, only to rapidly develop a form of armor plating covering its entire body. The armor was comprised of an unknown, unidentifiable substance, but it was enough to prevent SCP-5683 from combusting. Reconvening with the rest of the team, Dr. Christensen hid his pride, assuring everyone he was just trying to establish a baseline during the previous test. Of course, he hadn't believed that terminating SCP-5683 with fire would be a success, or so he claimed, hiding how much he'd longed for an easy solution so he could snatch up the vacant Site-04 director position. But to ensure the others, Christensen explained that he'd requisitioned some anomalous materials from the O5 Council that they'd be using in their next termination attempts. Nothing that was anomalous enough to require containment, but toxic enough that they presented a few options for destroying SCP-5683. Just for logging purposes, sir, may I inquire about the specific substances we're shipping in? Junior researcher Sylvia had asked. Of course, Y220, Y835, and Y43. Dr. Christensen quickly recounted them all from memory. I'm told they should be arriving within the week. I expect each would be enough to do the job, but it's best to hedge our bets. This spider doesn't compare to the lizard, I'll tell you that. Junior researcher Silva seemed to take an interest in what Dr. Christensen had just alluded to, his previous work with the lizard. He probed further about it, and Christensen gave a solemn response. The aspiring Foundation doctor recalled an incident from a few years earlier during his experimentation with SCP-682. Some of the methods Dr. Christensen had opted to employ in an attempt to destroy the hard-to-destroy reptile had led to a severe containment breach. When describing it, he used the word unpleasant, perhaps out of guilt at how many personnel had lost their lives due to his actions. Brushing the topic aside, he assured the team to get on with testing the new anomalous stimuli on SCP-5683. Stimulus Y220 initially showed some promise. During a tissue sample test, it successfully converted part of SCP-5683 into glass, which then violently exploded, leaving nothing behind. But attempts to use it to neutralize the creature itself quickly quashed those promising results. Within 9 seconds of being exposed to Stimulus Y220, SCP-5683's body rapidly turned to glass. Around 80% of its arachnid mass proceeded to explode, shattering in all directions, sending clear shards showering over the testing chamber. As he watched, Dr. Christensen allowed himself to believe that this was mission accomplished, that he'd successfully terminated SCP-5683. But his celebration was premature. The spider quickly began reconstituting itself, its body regenerating within the space of 30 seconds. After testing with both stimuli Y220 and Y835, Dr. Christensen's frustration seemed to be increasing with each failed attempt. He knew his promotion was within reach, and as far as he could remember, he'd done good work with damaging SCP-682. Why should eradicating this anomalous spider be any different? However, it was a test with stimulus Y436 that enraged the ambitious doctor. Expecting the anomalous stimulant to turn SCP-5683 into a fine mist, Christensen watched as the creature's body vanished, literally vaporizing, changing states of matter to little more than water in the air. Suddenly, every light in the facility powered off, plunging the testing chamber into darkness. When the lights came back on, SCP-5683 was standing on all 8 legs, right where it had been missed only 3 seconds earlier. The research team had gathered for another mediation, and Dr. Christensen's anger still hadn't subsided. He kicked a chair to emphasize his frustration, alarming junior researcher Silva, who urged him to calm down. After eventually cooling his temper, Christensen made an announcement that caused even greater concern to spread amongst the team. I'm requisitioning Y910. Researcher Halls and Researcher Miles objected, trying to get Dr. Christensen to realize that the course of this action was excessive, overkill even. But Christensen disregarded them, standing by his latest method for terminating SCP-5683. The Global Occult Coalition had previously used Y910 to poison gods. He felt sure that it would work on one anomalous giant spider. His time was running short. Dr. Christensen was aware that any day now, the O5 Council would be appointing a replacement director of Site-04, and he wanted that promotion. And he didn't seem to care what corners he cut and what risks he took to get there, even if it meant endangering his research personnel. Dr. Christensen declared that in order to save time, he would be bypassing tissue samples to test for termination attempts. The longer it took to terminate the anomalous arachnid, the more his window of opportunity closed, and the further the director position slipped from his fingertips. Accepting full responsibility for the reckless decision and anything that might go wrong, Dr. Christensen wanted to use stimulus Y910 directly on SCP-5683. He urged the research team to make the necessary preparations, unaware of what his decision would lead to, and the chaos it had already caused. The test was catastrophic, so much so that it caused a containment breach. With SCP-5683 loose and scuttling about the facility on its multiple legs, Dr. Christensen and junior researcher Silva were forced to rush to the secure bunker on site for safety. Christensen was in a state of panic until he noticed something, and not for the first time either. He'd been detecting a foul smell whenever he'd conducted the meetings to discuss termination options. But the other members of the research team had quickly explained it was nothing more than repeated accidents in the cafeteria. But here was the stench again, worse than ever. Yet junior researcher Silva brushed it off again, stating that SCP-5683 must have gotten into the facility's reactor. The junior researcher quickly became inconsolable, stating that the whole situation was his fault. Dr. Christensen interjected, demanding to know how it was and what Silva had done to cause this situation. He replied that it was his duty to oppose ill-advised actions, and when Christensen had declared his intention to use Y910, the junior researcher hadn't opposed him. Shifting the blame from himself onto his subordinate, Dr. Christensen chastised Silva over how many personnel had died because of the junior researcher's refusal to do his job, ignoring that it was Christensen's own ambitions that had led to the current chaos. Refusing to be made a scapegoat, Dr. Christensen vowed to pin the full culpability for SCP-5683's containment breach onto junior researcher Silva, saying he'd tell the O5 Council the so-called truth about what had happened. But Silva pointed out that there wasn't much of a likelihood that the bunker would survive the reactor overloading. He urged the ambitious Foundation doctor to admit some responsibility of his own for what had happened, but Christensen refused. Suddenly, there came a thunderous banging at the bunker door. A debilitating pang of fear struck Dr. Christensen, causing him to scream and retreat from the entrance, yelling "no" and "please," as if he was pleading with the universe itself to spare him from the spider. Junior researcher Silva walked over to the bunker door just as strong arachnid legs tore the heavy steel bulkhead off its hinges like it was made of little more than wet paper. There was SCP-5683, the enormous spider skittering into the bunker, screeching all the while. Silva had put himself between SCP-5683 and the ambitious Foundation doctor, whose hunger for a promotion had led to all this carnage. The junior researcher announced his noble intention to sacrifice himself, occupying the creature while urging Christensen to run. The doctor shoved Silva towards the spider and prepared to run, then all of a sudden, SCP-5683 vanished. Junior researcher Silva told Dr. Christensen he was disappointed, before researcher Miles, researcher Hall, and security chief Ade all entered the bunker through the torn open hole where the door had been. Christensen questioned where SCP-5683 had gone, to which Silva explained there was little reason to keep a dummy around once it had served its purpose as a substitute. "You mentioned you worked with the lizards, sir," the junior researcher recounted, "that there was a containment breach. If you don't terribly mind me asking, how did you escape that situation? It seemed quite lethal, didn't it?" Afraid and confused, Dr. Christensen asked where he was. Hall and Miles urged him not to ask questions he already knew the answer to. Silva explained who they all were, a jury, specifically Dr. Christensen's jury, and according to them, the ambitious doctor had disgraced himself again. Christensen had been there for a long time, a considerably long time, reliving the same events over and over again, with SCP-5683 acting as a substitute for SCP-682. It was the same situation, he'd made the same decisions, the same mistakes, and it had cost lives. Now Dr. Christensen was trapped in an endless loop, penance for the casualties that had occurred at his hands, all in the pursuit of his own selfish personal gain. He asked the jury how long he'd be stuck there, a question Silva responded to with, "Until you take responsibility, sir." Immediately, Dr. Christensen tried to admit that this all had been his fault, but he didn't mean it. Not really. He hadn't accepted blame. He just wanted a quick and easy way out of the loop, and the jury of his deceased personnel knew it. Christensen ran for the door in the hopes of escaping his fate. Futile as his chances were, a black iron chain appeared from around the corner and wrapped itself around the overambitious doctor's throat, ignorant of his pleas for forgiveness. Saying he was sorry wouldn't bring back the people who died in service of his aspirations to becoming a site director. The chain dragged Dr. Christensen through the facility at such a speed that he collided with every wall and every corner as he turned sharply, being pulled along the floor. But that and the walls quickly crumbled away, revealing a sight that made Dr. Christensen start screaming that it wasn't his fault, and he never really stopped. What followed involved a great deal of blood and fire. Once it was over, it left behind the same awful stench the doctor had smelt before, and he'd soon be smelling it again too, as the cycle repeated itself. The directive had come straight from a member of the O5 Council. They were impressed with Dr. Christensen, and the ambitious Foundation doctor had been hoping to snag a director position at Site-04. But there was one final test for Dr. Christensen to solve the SCP-5683 problem. Now check out SCP-5000Y, the full story compilation, and SCP-3023, and then it decided to be an angry spider for more.